All right. Hello. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to ELTOC 2022, the June edition. So we're really happy to be back at ELTOC with all of you. And thanks everyone for joining us from all around the world. I see people from Thailand, Australia, Egypt, Colombia, all over the world. Let us know in the chat where you're joining us from, and let's get the conversation started. My name is Joshua. I work for Oxford University Press based here in Tokyo, Japan. So I'm joining you from a hot, humid, about 35 degrees, very warm summer day. So let us know where you're joining from. How's the weather where you are, etc. Let's get some. There we go. Argentina, Colombia, Costa Rica. Nice. Paraguay, Egypt again. Yeah, people joining from all over the world. Well, thanks again for spending some time with us today. We've got an amazing session. If you joined the first block of ELTOC, which happened about 12 hours ago, we had 3 great sessions, lots of engagement with the presenters, speakers, and all of you teachers. So we're back here with the second block of this ELTOC. And yeah, this time we're in a more time zone for kind of the Asia countries and that. So we welcome lots of people from around Asia, but of course from all over the world as well. We've got 3 amazing sessions today. We've got one on online assessment with Mark and Maria. They'll be going through some best practices and tips for assessing students online. We've also got one on learning through literature with Rob and Kevin. So they'll be talking about, some ways that we can get the most out of reading and help improve our students' English through that. And then we'll wrap up the day with a session on making up for lost learning, getting back to the classroom and back to teaching after the 2 years of the pandemic. I know it's different in every country. Some people are still in it. Some people are coming out of it. So we've got a few people from around the globe that can share their experiences and hopefully have a conversation with all of you and give everyone some good ideas on how we can move forward with that. So again, if you have any questions at any point throughout the day, we have a team of moderators here to help you out and support you. We're streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So whichever platform you're using, just find the chat, send out messages if you need any assistance from the moderators, but more importantly, just engage with your fellow teachers, engage with the speakers, and just enjoy the day and be part of the conversation, basically. We've got a lot of content today, and we've got a lot to share. So make sure you have a drink, some snacks. We're going to go basically back to back to back sessions, so there won't be a lot of time in between. So make sure you're comfortable, got a cushion on your chair, etc., and just enjoy the day. We will have certificates available after the session. It is only available for a few days' time. So do make sure if you want your certificate that you click on the links when they come into the chat. There's the banner for the certificate. So it's only available until Monday, the 27th, 9 a.m. That's British summertime. So you can work out the time in your own time zone. But basically, you just got a limited time, just a few days to claim your certificate. So if you do want a certificate, make sure you click on the link in the chat when it appears. And you'll find, when you click on that link, you'll find a web page that has loads of resources that cover sessions throughout the day. So you'll find information on certificates, some of the focus papers that we've published, as well as things how you can follow us on social media, sign up for waiting lists so you can always find out when the next ELTOC is coming, so you can make sure that you don't miss that. So lots of information there as soon as that link gets in the chat. But we'll be posting it throughout the day, so don't worry if you miss it now. I'll keep reminding everyone in between the sessions about the certificates and all the resources we have to share. So with that said, we're going to get started with the next session in a few minutes' time. So as I say, get a drink and get comfortable. I've seen lots of people posting where they're from. But what's the weather like where you are? As I said, here in Tokyo, it's really humid and quite hot. I've got the air conditioner blasting, so hopefully that'll keep me cool throughout the day. Anyone else have a different? I know it's summer some places. It's probably getting colder in other places. Hello, Bolivia, Indonesia, Egypt. Yeah, people joining from all over. Warm. Someone said warm. Ooh, cold in Mexico. I'm jealous. I could use a little cool weather at this point in the year. Thai, hot as usual. Yeah. Oh, we've got someone from Japan. So nice to have someone in the same at least temperature as me. We've got windy, summer, sunny. So looks like we've got a variety of weather throughout. Great. As I said, I know people are going to be asking about certificates throughout the day. So do make sure you claim your certificate within the next couple days before Monday, 9 a.m. And that goes for people attending the session live. If you're watching this recording, you can still claim your certificate if it's before that deadline of Monday the 27th. If you're watching this recording after it, apologies, you won't be able to get a certificate, but there's lots of other resources on that page that you can still access. All right, we've got a session starting in about 3 minutes, so last chance to grab that drink, coffee, tea, whatever, and get seated back and in front of your computer or mobile phone. As I said, we're streaming on 3 different platforms: Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So if you need help from the moderators, find the chat on that platform, reach out, and yeah, just engage with your fellow teachers and with us. And hopefully everyone gets a lot out of this event and has lots of things to bring back to your own classrooms. All right, we've just got about another minute, and then I'll start introducing the next session. So let me just quickly look at the schedule. So as I said, we've got one session starting in a couple minutes time on online assessment. Following that, we'll be looking at learning through literature, and then we'll wrap up the day with a session on making up for lost learning. So hope you're all ready for the first session. I'll go ahead and start introducing our presenters. Just let me get them on screen. So the first session, as I said, is on online assessment, adapting our assessment practices. And we're very happy to be joined by 2 speakers with lots of experience on the topic. So Maria Pignataro and Mark Richard. So let me give them a quick intro, and then I'll get them on screen for you. So Mark is based in Taiwan. He works for Oxford University Press as a senior professional development manager, and he's got over 20 years experience in ELT in East Asia, Europe, and has been teaching all age groups in various schools and agencies across those areas. And then Maria Pignataro is joining us from Argentina. So she's worked as an EFL teacher for over 20 years as well in various primary, secondary language schools. And she currently works for Oxford University Press as the Assessment Business Development Manager. So I'm very happy to welcome them both on screen. So Mark and Maria, I'll add you on. And I will go ahead and leave the session in your capable hands.
Okay, thanks, Josh.
Oh, thanks, Josh. I'll miss you. But maybe we can catch up another time. Thanks, Josh.
So, Mark, great to join today for ELTOC and talk about online assessment.
Yeah, it is, and we're at opposite sides of the world almost. Yeah, I mean, Argentina is pretty much the exact opposite to where Taiwan is, and it's my 9 o'clock in the morning here in Taipei, Taiwan.
My 10 p.m.
Yeah,
here in Buenos Aires.
I'm ahead of you by, 11 hours or something. And I'm looking at the chat box. Uzbekistan, Mexico, Bangladesh, south of Chile, all over the place. 2 Celsius degrees, but I'm not sure where. We just had, Josh was talking about the weather, and Taiwan just had something called Meiyu Jijie, which means plum rains kind of season, or it's like a rainy season. It's the wettest one I can ever remember, and I've lived here about 20 years. It's just rain, rain, rain for about 3 weeks, it felt like. But now it's getting hot and humid, right? I'm not sure.
We're starting the winter here, so it's really cold. We haven't seen the sun for the whole week. We've had miserable weather this week. Seems like
Maria.
next week will be better.
Well, I have my fingers crossed for you, and
yeah.
let's hope so.
Next week, sunshine is forecasted.
Okay. All right. Well, let's hope there's I think, and I'm going to say sunshine is forecast no matter where you are, what time. 4 a.m. in Greece. That's ridiculous of you, Hippocrates. There, 4 o'clock a.m. How are you managing that? So thank you very, very much. I'm going to forecast sunshine for the next 40 minutes, Maria, for everyone in this. So let's see. Let's begin. Where shall we begin, Maria?
I think that a good place to begin is always defining our terms. So probably let's see what we mean by assessment, right? So basically what we think, or the way we define assessment, is means by which we collect information to know where our students are, what they know, and what they can do. And with that information, we are able, as teachers, to make informed pedagogical decisions, right? So I think that's a good way to start, defining our terms, and also thinking about the 2 different types of assessment when we need to assess, right? Because sometimes we want to assess what our students know, right? And so we will focus on assessment of learning, what our students can do. Yes, summative assessment, lots of different technical words for the same thing. Or we may also be interested in focuses on the progress that our students are making, and use that information to continue their learning journey. And so then we will be focusing on assessment for learning, and that will be formative assessment, right? So having this clear in mind, I think will help us continue with the session and really making use of all the other pieces of information and tips that we will be discussing, knowing where we are. And the next thing that I was thinking about maybe is, Mark, you can tell us how we can choose a good way to assessment, a good approach to assessment.
Yeah, okay, Maria. And I think it's important to say there's no one way that's ever going to be perfect, right? And you're going to choose an approach. Well, only you know your students, right? And you know your resources. That's important. And so the teacher knows best about how to choose the best approach to assessment. But to help everyone, I think of it as just 1, 2, 3, right? And 3 key questions. The first is why, the second is what, and the third is how. Okay, and the most important thing is to start off by asking why. Why do I want to assess my students? Right, this is vital, and it goes back to the whole meaning of what assessment is. Why do you want to assess your students? And another way of saying this is to think about this key word, which is action. Right, you can evaluate, you can assess your students, but what's the point unless you plan to take some kind of action from that assessment, right? And getting that information from your students, you've got to do something with that information. So why do I want to assess my students? That's how I start off. And then another way of thinking about that is to say, what action will I take as a result of this assessment? And so, for example, maybe one action could be summative, to give your students a result at the end of term or the end of a semester. Another kind of action you could take as a result of assessment would be formative, or assessment for learning. So, for example, you assess your students, and it informs your decision about what you're going to teach in the next class, right? Do you need to review a bit of grammar they didn't quite get, right? And that's where, so that's the action you take. So that's key. Why are you going to assess your students? And think of it in these terms. What action will you take as a result of that? So that's one. Next is what. So what do you need to assess? And a key word is information, right? Assessment is all about the teacher getting information about where their students are at. So what information do you need to take the action? So if your action is you're going to give students a grade, what information do you need so you can do that? If your action is to plan your next lesson, what information do you need to help you to do that? Okay, and then the third question is how. So you know what you want to do, what action you want to take, you know what information you need. So how best to obtain that information? Okay, so I'm going to give you an example here. Okay, let's say the action I'm going to take is, do I need to review the speaking lesson? And we're going to do an example speaking lesson where students are describing a city or describing their neighborhood using adjectives, using, I know, a certain target grammar point. Well, I need to get information from my students to see if they've got that. And how best can I do that? Well, let's say speaking. If I do an online assessment for their speaking skills, but it starts off with a huge list of written instructions about how to do this assessment, am I really testing my students' speaking skills? They might not actually do very well in the assessment because they can't read those instructions properly. So it's more like a reading test. So it sounds simple, but you really have to think carefully about, well, I need to hear my students speaking. That's the information I need. And don't let that written instruction get in the way. So that's what it is, Maria. Why do I want to assess my students? What do I need to assess? What information do I need? And how am I going to do it? Okay, so just a quick summary. I'd say how to choose the best approach to assessment. It's this. You're choosing the best way to obtain the information you need so that you can take the action you want to take. And that's it. And I mean, there are other factors you have to consider, like resources and principles of making a good assessment, right? But I'd say I'd look at those three. Yeah.
Great.
What are what are some of those principles? I guess
that's what I was thinking as you were talking, right? And one of the things that you said, and you used a different word, you said to evaluate our students, right? And I think something very important to bear in mind as well is the difference between these two words, assess and evaluate. They are very similar. They may be taken as synonyms, but there is a slight difference. And there are people joining who speak Spanish. And I've also seen this as a limitation in Spanish because we do not have two words for that. We just have evaluación, right?
Whereas I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Because in English, saying assessment, this collecting information to make decisions, is not exactly the same as evaluating. Evaluation is this is okay, this is not. Oh, I'm going to give you a mark, right? So thinking about this is another important issue and thing that came to my mind as you were talking, and you mentioned the word evaluation, not synonym of assessment. Similar but different, right? And going to the principles and the things that need to be, we as teachers need to pay attention to when we assess our students. You talked about this question of making sure that the test actually tests what you mean it or what you want it to test. So in a bit of more of a technical term, we were talking about validity, right? Basically. And I'm sure this is a word that is familiar for many of the people that are listening to us today. Another thing, and this is just paving the way into the online assessment and tips and things that we may be giving today, is practicality, right? When you think about what when you know what you want to test, you need to see how you're going to test it. And one of the key things is to think about practicality. For example, thinking about online assessments, you may want to test your students' writing skills, and you think about giving them a timed essay to write on a platform. But if your students only have access to a telephone or to a cell phone, not a notebook or a laptop, then that test will not be really practical for your purpose. So thinking about practicality is thinking about all the resources that we have. Yes, we all have constraints with resources, with time, with devices, but bearing in mind your context and what devices and things you at your institution and your students at the institution or at home have will help decide what a practical test will be.
Right. And I'm looking while listening to you, I was looking in the discussion box, and just a couple of points. There was someone in a font or in a script which wasn't English or any script I recognized. So sorry, I can't read your name. Saying feedback is a kind or a form of formative assessment. Well, feedback is one of the keys to formative assessment. And I just want to mention to that person who asked about feedback, there is a there we go. I can't read that. Feedback is a kind of formative assessment. I really want to let you know that there's a position paper which is actually called Effective Feedback, the Key to Assessment for Learning, which is formative assessment. So if we could kind of have that up, then that person can read about that and how, we get information from students so that we can provide them with great feedback, which will help them to learn better, right? And that's assessment for learning. And there was another comment from Teodoro, not the one about Spanish, but he said something else, but it's zoomed up. It's almost too late. So, I think we should, let's see if I want to find Teodoro. Yeah, Teodoro says, you're right. Sometimes I can't, like Teodoro Catalan Nava. Sometimes I don't quite explain to my students the purpose of assessment. And I was thinking about sometimes teachers don't even ask themselves about the purpose. Why do I want to assess my students? And I thought that was an interesting comment, Maria.
And from Teodoro as well, he says, because in Spanish, it's not easy to differentiate between punitive evaluation and assessment. Yes, what is the purpose of assessing? Do we want to show our students what they don't know? And so I just correct what you have written, or do we want to get information, we as teachers, and to make our students aware of where they are? And we will go back to this feature of why it is important to make our students aware of the value of assessment for themselves and for their own learning, right? So I will keep that comment for later on.
Yeah, thank you, Teodoro. A little bit off track, but it reminds me of there are some. I heard a Spanish educator from Buenos Aires, professor of education. I can't remember his name, saying that things like these phrases like lifelong learning. If you translate that into Spanish, it just sounds ridiculous and it just doesn't have the same kind of ring. But that's so it's interesting these problems of terminology in languages. But let's move on to something I think. That nearly all teachers and students have faced, particularly in the pandemic. Challenges. Okay, so let's talk about challenges. And you see the question there pop up. What challenges do we face with assessing learning online? So I'd ask everyone around the world, even in Greece where it's 4 a.m., whoever's staying up from there, which, I mean, I'm not sure whether to congratulate you or to tell you to go to bed, right? But I'd like you to kind of to just type in the chat box just one or two of the greatest challenges that you or your students have faced trying to carry out assessment online, right? Which many of us have had to do in the pandemic. We've been forced to. So while these challenges come in, right, we really want to understand what challenges you faced so we can help you as much as possible, right? But Maria, you've talked a lot to many. You work a lot in assessment. You talk with teachers all the time in Argentina, I think, especially. So have they told you about the kind of challenges they've faced?
Yeah, one of the challenges that I've collected in visiting schools, you know that part of our job is visit schools, get information from teachers, and help them. That's basically what we do: help them with the materials that we have and support them. And a very common comment that we are getting is that students are finding it really difficult to concentrate. The concentration span for students has been drastically reduced with the pandemic, and probably one of the biggest issues with online, not only assessment but instruction in general, is this question of students being able to access many different sites or things at the same time. So they are typing a Word document, so they can go to check something on Google, but then they also have their social media open. And so this question of having so many things distracting them from what they are doing is a very common challenge that that teachers are facing in Argentina.
Right. Yeah, that concentration. I mean, it's so easy to be distracted online, isn't it? And I'm looking at the comments, and let's see. Yeah, and actually, Angeles. Sorry if I pronounced this wrong. I'm not. Is students sometimes are not that attentive and can get distracted, which is exactly what you've been saying, Maria. And then we've got another one from Balvidre again, or Balvidre. Cheating and plagiarism. I mean, have teachers in Argentina talked or been concerned about cheating? Because that seems pretty easy to do online.
Yeah, and I don't think it's only in Argentina that teachers are worried about cheating. But if you think of, if we go back to the basics and we go to the definition of assessment, and we start making our students aware of why assessment is important, probably we can start reducing, I don't know if cheating itself, but making students commit to what they are doing and seeing the real value of assessment, right? So, of course, when you can, I mean, you can always cheat at work, in any instance of life. But when you start understanding the value of what you are doing, well, probably that's something we as teachers need to start working on. And probably a good idea is to, maybe many of the people listening have already heard of this, but to write a code of honor with students, thinking about why it is important, students participating in writing the code of honor, signing the code of honor. And so with all that, then students, before cheating, they will say, I am only cheating myself. So probably going to that may be useful. I don't know. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'll get back to cheating, right, in a minute. But what I think, okay, I'm just looking at some of the comments. We've got a few comments, like from Aja or Azar Youssef, lacking internet connection in my classes. So we've got a few comments. Hopex Itzel in Latin America, the internet connection was the problem.
Yeah.
We've got a few. Oh, Maria Kojic from Serbia. It's 3:15 a.m. there. We acknowledge. Well, congratulations. Is that worse or better than 4:15 a.m.? I'm not sure actually. Is that getting up really early or going to bed really late? Right. Either way. So, and what else? We've got. Okay, Karam. Challenging is that we have internet problems in Pakistan, especially rural areas. So that's like something that if you're doing an assessment live online, then yeah, you need to kind of guarantee that everyone's internet connection is fantastic. But in many places around, and I'll come back to cheating, but just looking at these comments, if you sometimes have internet, sometimes don't, I think you have to look at asynchronous methods, which means that students can do the assessment, but they don't all have to do it at the same time. And it means that when the internet connection is good, they can do an assessment. So maybe later we can talk about what approaches which help, like portfolios. I know you've got some experience with those, Maria, but taking the pressure off of that live internet connection, we'll address that towards the end, I think. So I'm going to keep that in mind. But back to cheating. My favorite thing actually is to completely redefine what cheating is. Right. And I'm going to ask you, Maria, and I want everyone else at home or wherever you are to think about this. When you're at work and you're given an assignment to do, right? You have, are you allowed to look at the internet? Are you allowed to look at a book to help you? Or let's imagine you're a student doing an essay in university. Do I have to do I have to kind of turn everything off and lock myself away in a room by myself with no phone? I tell you, in real life, I don't know about you, Maria, but almost everything I do at work, I have to find resources online to help me, find books to help me, and then what I do is I decide what's appropriate, right, for what I want to kind of my task. I synthesize the information and then I produce something. And that's real life. So what I really, really like, and my way of dealing with cheating is to change what cheating means, right? This is called open book examinations. And so I think that if you're worried that your students are supposed to be doing an assessment online and they shouldn't be, copying something from another source, or they shouldn't be looking at a book. Okay, plagiarism is bad. I'm not saying copy, but I am saying it's fine. Why don't you just change the rules of the assessment and open book examinations, right? Instead of saying, do the assessment now, you have 30 minutes. What you do is you give your students a task, for example, writing an essay, or it could be, producing a video or something. And you say, you've got 3 days to do this, or you've got a week to do this. So typically you give them a longer time frame. And they will have to research, because that's a good skill to practice, right? In English or in the 21st century. And you allow them to look at books. You say that's fine. And then they do the task, right? And so what you're assessing is their English skills, whatever you're targeting, but you're also assessing their ability to actually go and find sources, to read sources, to find information and put it all together in a package. So there's nothing wrong, I think, with just saying it's going to be impossible for me to know that you're not looking at a book. Let them. And the rules are the same for everyone, so it's fair. And they're going to produce work, and it's like real life. That's what we do in real life. So I find that much more authentic. So that's one approach I have to deal with cheating, Maria.
Yeah, and I was thinking about all the principles that we mentioned before. We talked about practicality, we talked about validity. Authenticity is a principle of assessment.
Right.
So if we redefine cheating and think about, we connect it with authenticity and all the examples that you've just provided, I think we may have something there to think about and rethink in the way we assess our students.
And there's a couple of comments here. Elizabeth Vargas Torres. Cheating is not being honest with the rules established. That's a great point, Elizabeth. So you just change the rules. What's important is fairness, I think, at the end of the day. We all care that something is fair, right? And so, as long as everyone's following the same rules, it's fair. And then there's another comment, which is, where was it? Yeah, Tayaba Akil or Aquil. Children and adults cheat, but that's how we look at it. This, again, is a means of learning. It's how we perceive the concept, right? So just because you look in a book to give you ideas or some language structures you've forgotten, that's great. You're learning, right? And that's the main thing. Assessment helps learning, right? It's part of learning. It's part of teaching. So, rethink. And the other thing about that, just
comment.
Yeah, just one final point to make on open book examinations. is because you give students a longer time period to do them, it's not reliant. If the internet is bad for a couple of hours, it doesn't matter. Students, it allows for that kind of poorer internet connection. You can do the work offline and then upload it when the internet's good. So I think it's practical in those regards. Sorry to interrupt you, Maria. What was it? You saw a comment.
There was a comment which now I lost, but let's see if I can find here. Jotakat, something of the, sorry if I mispronounced the name, but says, by using the cheating as a process that students used to learn and punishing him or her, but making him or her understand it is wrong, right? So using this as a learning process, apart from English, we are teaching them values. And after all, of course, we are language teachers, but we are educators. So teaching values and teaching our students what is right and what is wrong, ultimately is also a very good thing to do in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm looking for, let's see, any more challenges. I saw a few earlier. I can't find there's so many comments. Thank you so much. Keep them coming in. I've seen something about some teachers saying, well, students sort of get used to assessing online, or at the start they're a bit confused and they need support. And so just generally, this is a key point I've seen many educators make, is it's to do with your students' digital skills. And sometimes as a teacher, I'm a teacher in my 40s, and it's tempting for me to think that 20-year-old students or even 10-year-old students, they know how to use online technology better than I do, right? And that might be true, but here's a really important point I'd like teachers to note. Even if your students know or say that they know how to use the technology, well, they don't know how to use it for learning, and they don't know how to use it for assessment. And the research bears that out. Like 90% of students don't really know how to use the technology for learning and for assessment. Okay, so a big point is digital skills. Now, I think 10 minutes ago I said that if you've got a speaking assessment but it's full of written instructions first, you're not really assessing the speaking. It can be the same with students' digital skills. If you've got an online assessment, it's possible that your students don't do very well in it, not because of their English skills, but because they lack the digital skills or just don't know how to use the platform, right? Or software that you're using. So if this is the case, then students' digital skills or lack of them are kind of getting in the way of them being able to show their English skills, right? So what's essential is that teachers, you want to assess language skills, not digital skills, which means that you have to build some training into your teaching. Show your students the software, the tools that you're going to be using. I quite like doing this in class. If I have a face-to-face class, I take time to show them, hey, everyone, bring your device, log in, see if they can all log in. So if there are any issues with, like, forgotten my password or something, I like dealing with that face-to-face in class. And then when students, are at home, you don't get lots of emails about, oh, I can't log in. And the other thing is, show them in class or online, whatever's best for you, how the platform works, and give them opportunities to practice using the tech. Okay, we need to show them, and they need to practice, because when it comes time to do the assessment, especially if it's quite high stakes and more summative, you can't have the tech and the software getting in the way, right, of the assessment. So that's vital. Train your students on the digital skills, just as you train students to use the classroom physically. You train students to put their hands up, to ask if they can go to the bathroom, or you train students to sit down at certain stages or take their books out. We need to do the same kind of training for the online environment as well, so that everyone understands how it works. And then when we do the assessment, our brains are just focusing on the language and the skills involved. So that's something I would say there.
Yeah, familiarization with the formats. Let not the format prevent our students from showing all they can do and all they know.
Yeah. Any other challenges? And then maybe we can kind of, there's one more, something I find a lot of teachers, I'm currently teaching an online course which involves assessment. And just one thing to bear in mind, students need a lot of not just technical support, they need sort of emotional support. We call this pastoral support. Being online can make people anxious, right? Kind of nervous. When I buy a plane ticket or a train ticket online, I always get super nervous. I with my credit
Yeah.
card check, then you're kind of waiting, purchase, and the screen goes ding, 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 and I'm terrified that it is not going to work, right? And if I were in an office, the person could help me, but I'm so scared something will go wrong. And so when you get online and you get assessment, students get super nervous, anxious. So
Yeah.
make sure, like you said, going back to the definition and the reasons, make sure your students understand what is being assessed and why, and prepare them. Have a Q&A forum, for if you're online on a platform, have a forum or a class where students can ask you questions they like, and you can say, oh, great question, and share the answers with everyone. Also have a private way of letting the students contact you to ask their concerns, and so I think that's important too. Give your students a
Yes.
chance and a place to ask questions, and slowly the teacher will build up a repertoire of answers, and you can start doing Q&As. So I think that's important too, that kind of pastoral support.
Yeah,
Okay.
another thing that teachers can do is record yourself. Short
Yeah.
recording with all the explanations before the test, not about the content, but about the format. So when I ask you to choose the correct answer, you should click here, and perhaps it's 30 seconds long, not something sophisticated, something that can be shared very easily on any platform or cell phone or email, but things that will help reduce this anxiety from students,
Yeah,
will be really beneficial.
that's right. And we've got some comments. Let's see, Noelia Orapeza or Orapetha. Teachers can make some oral assessments with the camera to avoid cheating. Yeah, we should talk about videos. And also, that reminds me, I find myself often doing screencasts where I capture the screen and just show students don't know something about an assessment. So I just show them, look at what we're doing, click this, and my narration, I can say, what we are assessing is this, we're assessing it to help you with this, what and why, and here's how we're going to do this. So I find videos are very useful, and teacher and students can watch them whenever they can. But shall we move
Mhm.
on to uh, I guess there's lots of ways we can do it. So let's move on to that. So many good comments.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah, what are some different kinds of assessment?
yeah, and here I was reading the chat box, and Rosendo Rodriguez wrote exactly that question. What instruments do you recommend to put into practice a process of assessment?
Right.
So he
We have
just
someone
hit
mentioning
our
Kahoot there.
next.
Yeah, and
Yeah, yeah,
Uvisa says Mark's comments remind me of Kahoot. Some students
yeah.
just don't get it. Have you ever used Kahoot or anything like that, Maria?
Yeah, very useful
Hmm.
apps. There are lots of apps that can be used. You can use Kahoot. You can use, for example, Mentimeter, and there are some tools that we don't think of, or there are some apps or pages that we don't think of them as means to assess our students. But for example, if you think of Mentimeter, right, you know that
Yeah.
you can build word clouds, right? So for example, this is something that I used in a seminar. I asked participants what was they associated with assessment, right? So
Hmm.
by building this cloud, I am assessing from my audience what they know about the topic, their assumptions, and there was that are bigger are the ones that are more frequently said. So this was kind of warm up. But if you think, for example, of you've taught, I don't know, phrasal verbs, you've taught some adjectives, you've taught colors. It can be as simple as colors, food, animals. If you ask your students to type, to write 3 animals from last class, and you get these words and you get the big ones there in the middle and then the very small ones just there, this is very useful information to know what the most, the words that students remember the most and which ones you need to revise with them. So this is great information for you, very simple, no preparation. I think that one.
Like. Yeah. We see teachers putting all of their apps. Sometimes it's confusing because there are so many. You don't need to use many. Just pick 1 or 2 and stick with them. So students are used to it. But something that maybe the last thing we can talk about is assessments all over the place. It's nice to sort of have somewhere where you can gather a student's progress kind of together. And I mentioned e-portfolios a little earlier. So why don't we end with that? And then after this, we'll get you to share with us what your favorite ideas from this session are. But what's this, Maria?
Well, e-portfolios, we've been working with portfolios for many, many years. And with the pandemic, there had to be a way of doing this online. So basically, the concept of portfolio has not changed. The only thing that changes is the format, right? So with portfolios, there are lots of things that we can develop in our students. Yes, there is always, we always focus on the process, first of all, because there is all the material there is curated. Students produce something, the teacher corrects it, other students correct it, there is self-correction, peer correction, teacher correction. Students can also develop self-reflection, critical thinking skills, right? And so with these e-portfolios, they can work on their own, but they can also work in a group, so they also practice collaboration. So apart from assessing language, look at all the things that are going on with e-portfolios, right? This is an example of Google e-portfolio where you see the product and how it looks. But Josh, if we can go to the next image, we also see that students themselves can see their goals, what they are learning, their own purposes. They can decide what they want to improve on. So e-portfolios are a great tool for assessment. Online. And if technology is an issue, we've read that connectivity may be an issue. This can be done on paper, and students can just get photographs and upload to share. So, it can be very technological, but you can also do it the old way. And students with access whose access to technology is not that great, well, they can do it on paper and still produce good quality things and share that with the rest of the class. So that's why there are lots of things going on with e-portfolios.
Okay, great. And what I think important in e-portfolios is you can get students to write things. It can be low tech or high tech. Can you upload videos there? I mean, I haven't talked about it. I really like using videos, Oh yeah, you can. So I love video recordings. I talked about speaking activities. I like getting my students to record something where they, this looks like, I can imagine the student here is like saying something about where he lives or where she lives, and maybe some target language, describe the landscape. And so I really, really like using videos, because you know what, a good thing about videos, just briefly, and I think we have to finish, students record a video and they listen to themselves and they think, oh, I can do that a bit better. And they record again and again and again and again and again until it sounds great. And that's what we want from assessment, is to help learning. But I think that's it. So that's self-assessment, which is nice. But I think, video is magical. Now, there's so much we could talk about, but we are out of time. So if you'd like to, many of you have mentioned apps. I've talked about video. I'd love to talk for an hour about video, but I can't. But you can read more on the focus paper, right, which accompanies this session, which is called Assessing Online Learning. So maybe Josh can tell you about that. Okay, and the chat. So yeah, thank you everyone for all of your comments. Yeah, there you go. Please, in the chat window, you can see our focus paper. I think pretty much most of what we talked about is covered there, and you can get some further reading there too. I do hope you enjoyed this session, and still keep those comments coming in. What did you find the most useful? Because that's good information for us, right? It's like formative assessment for us, so we know what works well. So next time we can do that, and maybe, and see which didn't work so well, and we can think about that too, right? It's all progress. Maria, it's been really nice to talk to you.
There is one comment from Evelyn Becerra Ayala, which I would like to keep as the final comment for the session. And she says, flexibility is key. I think that really sums up what we need to do. Be flexible, understand our students, support them. And
that's right. And sorry to make one more fun. Don't put your eggs in one basket is related to that, right? If the more different assessments you've got going on, like I loved your portfolio, Maria, the more you can see. You need lots of assessment all the time, so you can see what's working, what isn't. And if one of them didn't work, you'll see it doesn't fit into the pattern. So yeah, thanks everyone. Saying thanks.
Thanks for joining. It's been a real pleasure having you here, and all the lovely comments.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, Maria. Wonderful session, and lots of engagement in the chat, lots of questions. So a topic that was really hitting the mark today. So thank you very much for those sessions. Everyone joining, if you liked the session, hit those like buttons. If you loved it, give us some hearts. And if you have a teacher that this topic would resonate with, please do share it with them. And let's keep the conversation going. So thank you again, Mark and Maria. I'll give you a one chance to say goodbye to the audience, and then we'll move on to the next session.
Thanks for joining. Lovely having you here today.
Thank you very much. Take care. Have a great weekend.
All right. So we've got a couple minutes. I'll just remind everybody that if you do want to get a certificate for this this block, you've got about 24 hours to do it. So you got to make sure you click those links and follow the instructions to get your certificate before Monday, June 27th, 9 a.m. British Summer Time. So don't forget to do that. If you're watching this recording afterwards, again, if it's before that deadline, you still have time to get your recording. So make sure you do that if you want to get your recording. We've got about a couple minutes. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenters in about 1 minute. So you do have a very brief moment to go fill up your coffee or have a comfort break, and we'll get the next session started in about a minute's time. Again, if you have any questions on any of the platforms you're joining us on, please do continue to post those into the comments section, and we'll try to answer as many as we can throughout the sessions and in between. So our next session, we're going to go ahead and get started, is on learning with or learning through literature. And we're very happy to be joined with Rob Peacock and Kevin Churchill. So I'll put them on screen in a moment. But before that, let me just give a quick introduction. So Kevin Churchill, he's a very passionate teacher. I've known him personally for a long time, worked with him for forever, it feels like. But he's got an experience that spans over 30 years. He's worked with English language learners in Japan, Singapore, UK, and he's currently teaching at a private high school here in Tokyo. And then the second speaker today is Rob Peacock. So he works for Oxford University Press as an educational services consultant. And he's got, again, loads of experience, over 20 years in Japan, teaching students of all ages from primary to adults. And he's very experienced delivering sessions at these type of workshops. So I will go ahead and pop them on screen, and I will leave the session in their capable hands. So Rob, Kevin, it's over to you.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Great. I'm good, Rob.
Great. Thank you.
I can hear you. I hope. Good morning, world.
Yes, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining ELTOC today. My name's Rob, and I work for Oxford University Press in Japan. I'm very excited to be here today to talk about learning through literature with Kevin Churchill, who is here with me today, a very experienced teacher and teacher trainer. Kevin, could you say hello?
Certainly, Rob. Thank you. Thank you for your introduction. Josh was very gracious as well. You both said very experienced. What you meant was very old. Yes, I'm very old. I'm 60 this year, and I've been teaching, working with students for half my life now, so about 30 years. And I'm still very passionate, as Josh said, about our profession, which is language teaching and working with young people, young learners. I currently teach in a high school, and I've worked with kindergarten students for the last 10 years. I've worked with secondary age school students. And I'm very looking forward to sharing ideas with you today. But first of all, Rob, can I ask you, as a child, what was it like growing up? We're both from the UK. What was your experience of learning and getting to grips with reading and the English language?
Well, literature really saved me, essentially, as a very poor, quite slow student when I was a child, because I found it very difficult to learn reading and writing. Spelling was very challenging for me at primary school. My teacher, tried to help me. She asked me to keep lists of words that I found difficult to spell, and that was a very long list, and asked me to memorize the spelling, that kind of thing. But those kinds of things didn't really work for me because I really just lived in my imagination, and any kind of dry way of studying would kind of be dragging me out of my fun child imagination world. So I could only do it for a certain amount of time. But it was when I started reading, particularly reading independently, that I was really helped, because I could get into interesting, fun stories, and that allowed me to stay in my imagination. In fact, the stories fed my imagination, and it allowed me to go to even more amazing different worlds through the stories, while of course interacting with the written form of my language. So naturally, my reading, my writing, my spelling got better. I never became like a straight A student, but I could do enough to pass all of the exams and the tests that I needed to pass. And so I enjoyed reading stories such as Terry Pratchett, who wrote a series of books in a fantasy world called Discworld, which really engaged me as a child. Kevin, do you know Terry Pratchett and the Discworld series?
Yes, I know. Yeah, I love Terry Pratchett, though I haven't read his work, but I love the fact that he used to wear a fantastic big hat, and I think a cloak, if I remember correctly.
Yes, if anybody Googles him, then you'll probably see him.
He's definitely
in that famous get-up.
In the literary world. He looked a bit like a Gandalf, a modern day Gandalf, I think.
I think that was the look he was going for. So how about you? What kind of a role has literature played in your life?
It's very interesting to hear your experience of growing up and learning to read, because actually it resonates with my experience. I didn't grow up with books, but my parents took me to the local library, and I can remember loving that space because there were lots of books. It was like entering not just a different world, but many different worlds. And I was always attracted by the illustrations. Now, I struggled with reading at school as well. And I think it's because I'm dyslexic. That's a self-diagnosis. I grew up in the 70s. I went to school in the 70s. And phonics, systematic phonics, it was synthetic phonics. It was not the fault of my teachers, but phonics was not a deeply understood way to help students learn to read. So I struggled a lot. But what made a big difference to me were, of course, my teachers. So without my teachers, it would have been a bigger struggle. Also, as a boy, I remember being taken to the Royal Shakespeare Theatre a lot because my uncle worked at the theatre. I was born in Stratford-on-Avon in the UK. And it was fascinating. My uncle worked in the props department of the theatre, and I would go and visit him sometimes when he was on lunch, and he was surrounded by old things like Roman swords and shields and things, and many of the costumes that Terry Pratchett would probably like to wear. So that was fascinating for me. It was like being a time traveler. And as a boy, I grew up reading comics, especially I remember Planet of the Apes. Planet of the Apes was one of my favorite comics. So I didn't really get into books until I was much older. And then I discovered the work of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. And I read all his books and was absolutely fascinated by that world. So in many ways, I think I'm an unlikely language teacher because I found learning to read, spelling, and reading quite difficult. But I think it gives me a deep empathy with my students that I meet now, and I really understand why students struggle.
Yes, that's a very important point, isn't it? I mean, we've been talking as native speakers about how literature helped us learn the written form of our own language. But how about students who are learning English as a foreign language? How can literature help them?
Wow, that's an interesting point. I mean, I think that literature helps us make sense of things. Stories especially provide depth and context to grammar point, drill or exercise. Stories open up new worlds. They help us to imagine what it would be like to be other people. Stories connect us to the past. They connect us to each other, and they allow us to challenge our preconceptions and immerse ourselves in different worlds and become different people. So literature has a massive influence on human beings. And I think that as teachers, it's great that we get the chance to try and share that and encourage our students to develop a love of reading and of literature and of exploration and knowledge.
Yes, exploration and knowledge are very important, aren't they?
Absolutely, absolutely, with spirit of adventure. Are there any specific ideas that, Rob, you have that would help teachers in a classroom situation, like methods or I'm thinking of All Nations ideas and work at the moment.
Yes, I think in order to look at how literature can help language learners, it's useful, first of all, to take a bird's eye view of the learning process and think about exactly what kind of activities learners need to engage with to learn a second language. So you mentioned Paul Nation. So let's have a look at Nation and Newton's ideas based on their extensive research. Can we have the slide up, please, on the 4 strands of learning? Great, thank you very much. So here is what is recommended by Nation and Newton on how to learn a foreign language, essentially. They've summarized all of the activities for learning into these 4 strands of learning, while recommending that equal time is spent on each. So 25% of your time studying a language should be spent on each of these. We first have language-focused learning, and this is where you would firstly memorize new vocabulary, learn the grammar, perhaps do intensive reading and intensive listening. So you'd be reading passages and listening to audio passages which are perhaps a little challenging. And perhaps read and listen to those passages many times. That's that same short amount of text until you have understood. We do all of our pronunciation work here, as well as phonics, perhaps for the younger learners. So that covers a lot of what many educators focus on in their classes, but it should only really be 25% of the time spent studying. We should also spend an equal amount of time on what's called meaning-focused input, and this would include extensive reading and extensive listening. Here, students are working with texts and audio passages which are very interesting for them and also contain lots of very easy language for that student. So they should be able to, for example, if they're reading, understand 90% of words on the page. When they can do that, they can read for pleasure, for interest, and read a lot of text, getting a lot of meaning-focused input. The third strand is meaning-focused output. So here students are doing speaking activities and writing activities where they're focused on conveying meaning rather than grammatical accuracy. If students do speaking and writing activities which are focused on accuracy, where the teacher is going to correct their mistakes, that will count as language-focused learning. For meaning-focused output, students simply convey meaning using whatever language they have at their disposal. If the meaning is conveyed, then that achieves the goal. So again, 25% of the time learning spent on that, and then a further 25% of your time should be focused on fluency development. So that could be speaking activities where students are encouraged to speak a little faster than usual. A good example is called the 5-2-1, where students prepare to speak about a topic. They'll speak to their first partner for 5 minutes, conveying meaning. Then they'll change partners and try to convey exactly the same information, but this time they only have 2 minutes. Then on the third round, they'll change partners again and convey the same meaning, but this time only speaking for 1 minute. So each round, students are encouraged to speak a little faster, a little more fluently. And then, of course, there's reading fluency, listening fluency. We can do timed reading, encouraging students to read a little faster each time. So across these 4 strands, we've got essentially 3 types of reading. There's intensive reading, which would be in language-focused learning, extensive reading, which we would do in meaning-focused input, and fluency reading, which is in the fluency development strand. So that's just a very quick introduction to those, and apologies for moving through them quite quickly. But Kevin, looking at these, what's your kind of general impression about learning through literature and how that would relate to the 4 strands of teaching?
Well, thanks, Rob. I mean, I think that's a very interesting way of looking at the 4 strands are a very interesting way of looking at what we do in the classroom. I'm particularly interested in the meaning-focused input because I think stories, books, literature help us create opportunities to experience language rather than merely study it. So our students, young learners or older learners as well, through books and through literature, it kind of opens up the classroom walls disappear, and suddenly we can find ourselves on the moon, in another country. We can go back in time. We can imagine going into the future. So it's really like being literature is a kind of superpower, isn't it? It's a tool like fire, probably. And so I love the fact that books and stories and literature give my students opportunities to expand their range of experience and consciousness, basically.
And that's what we really are trying to achieve with the meaning-focused input strand, isn't it? As I mentioned here, students are reading and listening for pleasure and to enjoy the story, as opposed to the language-focused benefits here. So they're really taking the language that they've learnt and enjoying that in those wonderful contexts. I love the idea of the classroom walls breaking down there, and we're transported to these wonderful places.
I think for sure, we should definitely always think about reading for pleasure and instilling the joy of learning in our students through literature, for sure.
Yes, and then of course there's the joy of speaking and writing and communicating as well, isn't there? And students can't just convey meaning straight away without any practice. They need some help to get good at that.
And of course, literature gives a shared experience, something that students can refer to, something that we can all enjoy, maybe as a story read to the whole class, and then students can read individual stories and share with each other or the whole class.
Certainly, I mean, sorry, to convey meaning when you're speaking and writing, then you really need to have something that you want to express to the other person, don't you? And, I've read this great book, let me tell you about it, is a great motivator to start people communicating.
I think as a teacher with my years of experience as well, I rely on stories and literature a lot, because inevitably, if you've got a lot of students, that you need to recharge, you need to get new ideas. And so as a teacher, reading is a great way to get new ideas and discover new things that you can do with students as well.
Certainly, yes. And it's such a flexible resource, isn't it? I mean, we've talked about how literature helps with meaning-focused input, meaning-focused output. But of course, if we're doing intensive reading as well, we could use a short passage from a novel or a story that's challenging for the students and use that for intensive reading, or use the audio passage for intensive listening. And we can challenge students to do speed reading, for example, for reading fluency.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea to use just a small passage of a story or a book in class, perhaps, and then give the students the opportunity to read at home. Of course, reading and using books and it gives a chance the students can interact with language every day over long periods of time. In my situation in the high school that I teach at right now, I only meet my students twice a week. So other teachers teach on the other days, but I can set up some learning goals that the students can then pursue on their own at home or on the bus or while they're in between class. Yeah, it develops autonomy and independence for the learner.
Autonomy and independence are really great goals to work towards, aren't they? And it's fantastic if we can set up a library of readers for our students and just encourage them to go in there, pick the books they want to read.
Absolutely.
And go and enjoy. But some educators mentioned that it's kind of difficult to do that straight away. Some students lack the motivation, the confidence, and the skills to be able to read or listen independently. So we might need some classroom activities to set our students up for success, teach them those skills, motivate them, and teach them the joy of reading. As a very experienced educator, what are some of the activities that you've found really helpful?
Well, I was worried that I'd forget some of these, so I've made a note. So forgive me.
Great. Thank you.
I over the span of my career, I work with high school, secondary school age children now. So that's like teenagers, young teenagers. And I've also worked with very young learners, and I found that throughout that breadth of youth, that students have an equal interest in stories. So I think it's very important. We should remember that I'm lucky at the moment. I teach in a school with a big library, so students have a big access to books. But some teachers might have less access to a lot of different books. But whatever access you've got to reading material, I like to encourage one very thing from the start is to ask students to, if you like, be critical thinkers and write a review of something that they may have read or worked with at school. Here's a very simple example. So if you're using a story or a book, you could ask each student, or if you've got shy students, maybe a pair of students or a group of students to note down the title of the book. They can list the characters. They can rate the story. I've used stars here, but you could use smiley faces. And then to just simply express why the student enjoyed the story or didn't enjoy the story. So writing a review of the story is one idea. Students could be encouraged to read and then write an alternative ending to a story. I like, you were talking about your teacher at school when you were a boy, encouraging to make a word list. If I'm using text with students, I'm always noticing what words are new and what are difficult so that I can review with the class or with individual students. So encouraging students to be independent and decide themselves the tricky new words or words that they're familiar with from the list. As they work down the list, the difficult words they will become more familiar with, and they will become learned and internalized words. So adding to the list is a fun thing. The list shouldn't be a trudge, a difficult thing.
Sure.
Write a review, an alternative ending, collect new words for students to work with, and also making a poster or making a presentation. As you can see behind me, with some of my high school students, we are, the theme is jobs. They're thinking about what they possibly might like to do or not like to do in the future. The theme is best job ever, which I think is being a language teacher. So different students choose what kind of job they might like to do. they research online, or they access the library. And you can see this selection I've got here. Students are considering being a vet or a doctor, or even being a superhero, or being an artist. So reading something, summarizing it, writing a post, creating a poster. I like the idea of using art in class with students, because some students struggle with English but are good at art. So to mix those disciplines it's complementary experience. Making a poster and then presenting to the class or presenting to their peers. If you've got shy students, you should never put pressure on students to present to a big group if they're uncomfortable with that. But a stage between presenting to the whole class could be creating a poster, presenting to your partner or your table group, and then over time building confidence in that and presenting to the whole class, or maybe even the whole school in a speech or some kind of presentation like that. How about you, Rob?
Thanks for all those great ideas. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, you're a very experienced teacher as well. What are some of your ideas about presenting literature in class with students?
Well, I think similar to some of the great ideas that you've mentioned, it's really great when students can take interesting information, such as the jobs poster, where they read about different jobs. That's meaning-focused input, and then made their poster and present it. So that's meaning-focused output. It's great to link the two things. And one communication activity which I really like is called interviews. Now, for this activity, we need to assume that the students have read some of the same books, so they're familiar with some of the characters in stories. So we could have, for example, Sherlock Holmes. Perhaps they've read Dracula. Peach Boy is very popular here in Japan, Momotaro. There's also The Elephant Man, Anne of Green Gables, if we're getting a little higher up. So there are all of these different characters which students have grown to know and love through reading. We could then do a class speaking activity where we ask the students, okay, let's choose one or two characters that we all know, and we're going to do a role play. We'll choose a student or the teacher, if all of the students are feeling shy, to play the character or characters. The rest of the class are then going to brainstorm questions that they would like to ask this character in an interview. And they'll write their questions down, make notes of the answers during the role play, and again, they could make a poster about the interview afterwards. So maybe we could illustrate this. Who's a good character or characters that we could choose?
I love the idea of asking questions and imagining one of the students is a character in the story. That really is bringing the story to life, isn't it? Well, I mean, Sherlock Holmes is a great candidate that springs to mind, or you mentioned Anne of Green Gables, but let's work with Sherlock Holmes to begin with. Okay,
so let's imagine that one of us will be Sherlock Holmes in the role play. What kind of questions do you think the students will ask?
Well, I would be, because he's a detective, I'd be very interested to know how he works out, how he looks for clues, for example. I know he's famous for holding a magnifying glass.
His magnifying glass, yes.
Yep. And does he, where does he get where did he buy his magnifying glass, maybe? I mean, because he's a character from history, I would be interested to know, what does he eat for lunch?
Yes, they didn't have Starbucks in Homestay.
Exactly. I mean, how did he come up with all those great ideas without a coffee? Possibly, where did he go to school? What subjects did he like at school?
Yes, I'd like to ask him about his pipe as well.
Well, that's right.
Has he ever tried to give up?
Well, I would recommend that he did, frankly.
Yes, I think so. Maybe about Dr. Watson too. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I think they're good friends. I mean, really, it's a relationship like ours, possibly. You being Sherlock Holmes and I'll be Watson.
I think it's the other way around.
Guess I'm older. And of course, Anne of Green
Gables.
Because
you're the more intelligent one, I think.
No, I only look like that because I wear a bow tie today.
You've already had some compliments on your bow tie in the chat.
Oh, no way! Thank you.
Yes.
I wish I could see. I can only see Rob, which is great, but I wish I could see everybody watching us today, because I must just say, like this morning, it's a Saturday morning here in Tokyo. And I'm quite tired after a long week at work, as all our participants are, I'm sure. And I did my best to tidy up the house. But when I realized that so many people were going to visit us today, I thought, where's everybody going to sit? But I can't see everybody's faces. But thank you for, if you like my bow tie, thank you very much. But before we move on, I would love to have met Anne of Green Gables as well. Because
what questions would you ask Anne?
Well, you see, I'm very interested in outdoors. I'm an outdoor kind of person. I like nature and stuff. And I would be very interested to know what it was like for her going to school. How did she get to school? Of course, these days we take mobile phones and buses and taxis and trains for granted. But maybe she walked to school. Maybe she used a bicycle. Maybe she rode a horse. I'm not sure. It would be fascinating to find out, wouldn't it?
It would, and the student who's playing Anne of Green Gables in that role play would then answer from their knowledge of the character or from her imagination as well. And then, of course, we'd write up the questions and answers, maybe draw some pictures. You mentioned involving the artistic students. So if they're good visual learners, then illustrations are really great. And we can put the posters on the classroom wall, as you've put them on your wall at home today.
Absolutely. Actually, a good friend and colleague at work is actually using the Anne of Green Gables story at the moment.
Really?
And I love his idea. We are very lucky at school. We have a nice ground, and we actually have, our school is next to a little forest that we can access safely. And I know that he's taken his students out into the forest, into the trees, and he's asked them to imagine being Anne and think about looking at the forest. How does it feel? What can they hear? If books help us to get rid of the classroom walls, but if you can access nature, I think it's really important to go outside and give children a chance to be in that kind of world.
It's a really nice idea, thanks. And anything we can do to bring these stories to life, I think, is so motivating for the students. We really want them to enjoy this world of reading.
Rob, I'm so sorry. When you invited me to talk about my favorite classroom activities, I forgot two important things.
Oh, okay. Please tell us about those.
And it's especially relevant in terms of my dyslexia, and because I want to introduce this idea of using a screener. This is it's just a piece of card, a screener. So some students, me in particular, even now, get confused. For example, this is something I printed out. And now, there's a lot of text on there for me, and I'm getting older now, so I need glasses. But even when I was younger, I find the text can be quite confusing. So using something like this, a screener, which then doubles up as a bookmark, piece of paper, or even an envelope, can help students keep their place on the page as they're reading. So, and sometimes I find I have to reread passages and read slowly. I like reading because it slows your mind down. So a screener could be a useful tool for you to use in class with your students. Also, if you're doing pair reading, the idea of, in England, we call these a lollipop stick. And if you're doing a pair reading, a partner can point to the place on the page as the other student reads. This can be an economical way to do reading in class with your students. It can be quite an expensive investment to have a book for every student in class at the same time. You could have one book between two students, and the student could read. They could read to each other using a screener. I am pointing, and you or my partner is reading the text. That involves the students that is not actively reading at the time, for example.
Great.
And if you pair stronger and weaker students, maybe if you've got a weaker student, the student that is weaker can just repeat what has been read by the stronger student. I nearly forgot to mention those two important, useful teachers.
Thanks for bringing those up. They're really great ideas.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for students to support each other while they're developing their reading skills in class. So let's talk about technology and how technology affects the way that we read. Now, you mentioned a couple of ideas that I believe you'd use with print books.
That's right. Yes.
And a lot of people really love reading with print books. Having a physical book that you can hold is a wonderful thing. Flick through the pages, underline words, use your bookmark, etc. How do you feel about using technology to read, using ebooks, for example?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Now, because I think the expression is digital immigrant rather than native, I find digital quite difficult. Now, I've just changed schools. At my previous school, we used a chalk and a blackboard. The board was green, but it was called a blackboard. And I've just moved to a very progressive, brand new school where all students use computers, tablets, and have lots of access to good access to the internet. So what teachers inevitably use in class will be determined in many cases by the environment that they're working in. I think that ebooks are a great resource because it gives a lot of access. Students consume a lot of books and stories through the digital platforms. I still personally like reading because I know that reading real books slows down the brain, whereas digital tends to speed up the brain. I think there are playoffs, good points and bad points about it shouldn't be an either-or situation. And the fact is that we are moving towards an increasingly digital kind of more digitally integrated future, aren't we, really? Especially in Japan, a very leading edge kind of technology-rich country.
Exactly, yes. So it's going to be hard to not incorporate technology into all aspects of the learning process, including reading. And as you mentioned, I think there are a lot of great benefits. For example, when students read in English, I think it's important that they listen to the audio as well to develop that very natural inner voice that's reading a story. We talked earlier about reading on the train, reading on the bus, reading at home. If you want to listen to a CD while you're reading a print book, then you have to have your CD Walkman, headphones, the CD. You have to hope that the CD doesn't get scratched. So there's a lot of trouble there. Whereas if you've got an ebook on your phone, tap of a button, you can play the audio straight away. Another great thing is for the teacher, because the teacher can track very easily online exactly what books students are reading, how long they spend reading, other things like which level of books they're reading, etc. So that gives a lot of extra tools for the teacher to moderate or to track their students' success online. So there are many benefits to digital as well.
Absolutely. Well, to me, it's a very interesting kind of question at the moment, because as you can see on my board, I've got one of my heroes behind me, two of my heroes. Let me introduce Socrates and Plato, actually, because it's very interesting that a long time ago, like 2,000 years ago, Socrates, it's very interesting that writing systems were basically developed at similar times in history in different pockets. So I come from the Western tradition where we developed an alphabetic system of writing. But at the time, it was a very controversial thing to go from not just remembering stuff, but actually to write things down. And I've got an interesting quote that I'd like to share with everyone. And it's from this fantastic book, which I love, it's called Proust and the Squid. It's by Mary Ann Wolfe. It's a brilliant book. It talks a lot about dyslexia and about the history of the writing, how the brain learned to read and write. It's a super book. And I put this post-it to help me remember to mention that initially with children and young learners, we learn to read. But as we move on, we then read to learn. So we go from the learning to read to reading to learn, which is an important stage. But Socrates, a long time ago, railed against this new thing, which was writing. And we know this because Plato, who was kind of progressive and almost like the Steve Jobs of his day, Plato wrote it down. For example, Socrates said, if people learn this, meaning writing, it will implant forgetfulness in their souls. They will cease to exercise memory because they rely on that which is written. Now, it's fascinating because we know this, because in a sense, Socrates was proved wrong, because writing has given us this fantastic gift, that the fire, the superhuman power of being literate, being writing. And really, when we learn to read, a transformation takes place in our brains, almost like the transformation between being a caterpillar and a butterfly. And as if by magic,
something just flew out of your book.
It is, yes. It's a transformation to illustrate the transformation of caterpillar to butterfly to non-reader to reader. It's a similar magical transformation.
I think that brings us full circle back to the idea of learning through literature. What
Absolutely.
is it that people learn through literature?
Well, it's very interesting. I would just like to end with a quote. I think we're coming up to times for questions, but John Steinbeck made this point very clear. That he wrote, he said, it's on the screen there, learning to read is probably the most difficult and revolutionary thing that happens to the human brain. We were born with the ability to speak and listen, but reading is a new skill that we have to learn for ourselves with teachers' help individually, and there's no shortcut really.
That's a fantastic point to end on. Thank you very much, Kevin. So just as just as the butterfly, we talked about with the butterfly, people becoming evolving and becoming something new, then reading also does that to our brains. It helps us to evolve, develop as people, and become something new. Great. Thanks very much for sharing all of your ideas there, Kevin. I was really interested to hear all of the ideas and activities that you shared with us today. Before we finish up, are there any questions in the chat that we should be responding to?
Good question.
Let me just double check. I think some people have posted some questions. Let me see. Okay, so Beth asked, can you suggest some free ebooks where teachers use which teachers use for their students?
That's right, and I think Josh has actually put that on. Try a free trial of Oxford Reading Club. Click below.
Great.
That's the perfect answer.
It is a perfect answer. Thanks, Josh. You can access many books there while your trial period is up. There's a great selection on the Oxford Reading Club from very young learners to primary, secondary, and adults. So please do check that out. Let me see if there's anything else that we should be answering here.
If not, I have a question for you, Rob. If not.
Oh, please go ahead.
Well, I'm just interested. Rob, what are you reading at the moment?
At the moment, I'm reading Kafka's The Castle. Have you read that?
Just a little bit of light reading then.
Well, you know what you said about reading slowing down the brain.
Absolutely.
So that does take me out of my head a bit when I'm thinking too much. Fantastic. It's a great stress relief as well. I mean, it takes us into a different world and a scary world in some ways as well. But it also reflects the world that we come from. So if anybody's had any problems with bureaucracy or difficult systems that make life difficult for us, Kafka really does some wonderful things with that. It's bizarre. But how about you, Kevin? Are you reading anything?
I was going to say, I think that the essence of what we're talking about today, the joy of reading, the gift of literacy, is exactly that you're experiencing. You're getting into the mindset of someone else, not just Kafka, but his characters in the book. Actually, these days, I have to read lots at work. I have to update on best practice and stuff like that. But something I've read, I really liked Brad Manuel's The Last Tribe, which is a fantastic read. If anyone is interested in picking up a new book, Brad Manuel's The Last Tribe is absolutely fantastic.
I'll have to have a look for that. I found a question that we had early on.
Great.
A teacher asked, why is it so difficult for students to start reading for fun or pleasure? Do you have any thoughts about this, Kevin?
I absolutely do. I think that it's very important that we allow students to enjoy reading. And I love, with my young learners, starting with, actually my favorite series is, Rob, the Oxford Reading Tree. The Oxford Reading Tree is fantastic. Roderick Hunt and Alex Richter created this fantastic story series. And what's beautiful about it for me is that there are lots and lots of pictures. So as I said, as a boy, I found reading very difficult, but I loved going to the library and I would be fascinated by the pictures, and the pictures would make me want to learn to read. Now, I've lived in Japan a long time, and I'm embarrassed to say that I can't read in Japanese, but I still collect Japanese illustrated storybooks because just look at the beautiful illustration. I think choosing the right book, or allowing students to choose their own book, or allowing students to, if it's your child, go to a bookstore and see if they like. If you're working with students, then have lots of different books and allow students to freely choose which books they like, and register what age or what child likes a specific kind of book, and build it from there. But don't force children to read something that's too difficult for them. It probably goes back to Paul Nation's idea of the 3 different ways of reading, and allowing students to read a lot at their level, or a little bit easy level, to develop fluency and speed is really important.
Yes, I think the most important things you mentioned there are ease, so reading material that's very easy for them, choice, being able to choose a story that's interesting for them, and then getting over, if it's younger students, then illustrations and things can really help them draw their attention into the book, whereas too much text can be a little intimidating at first.
Exactly.
Okay, I think we're coming up to time, so that's all the time we have for our session today. Thanks very much for joining me today, Kevin.
Well,
I really enjoyed our chat.
Rob and Josh, thank you for the invitation to be part of this. I think it's fantastic that you've given us all as teachers, the chance to get together today. And good luck and lots of joy to all the teachers watching us and sharing these ideas with us today. Have a fantastic
thank
weekend.
you very much to everybody who joined us, and I hope you go out and enjoy lots of literature, lots of reading yourselves, as well as your students. Thanks very much.
Happy teaching.
Josh.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Kevin and Rob. Wonderful session. Ooh, we've got some confetti. Seems appropriate. And thanks to everyone for all your engagement in the comments and the chats. If you liked the session, you hit the like button. If you loved it, give us some hearts, etc. Share this session with other teachers if you think it's something they need in their lives. But I just want to say thank you again to Rob and Kevin, and to all of you in the audience for attending. So, Rob, do you want to say a final goodbye, Rob and Kevin, before I pull you off screen?
After you, Kevin.
We're speechless and overcome with joy.
All right. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining us.
I got it. They all lived happily ever after.
Oh,
perfect ending. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay. Thanks. All right. So that, I hope you got a lot out of that session. Sorry, the sun is coming through my sunroof now, so I look like I'm in some kind of weird light box all of a sudden. But anyways, we've got one more session today, starting in a few minutes time. But ahead of that, we've got a quick break, about a 5-minute break, and we're going to introduce the Oxford English Hub in that time. So if you're interested in learning about our new digital platform, please do hang around. And right following that, we'll jump straight into the third session of today. So at that point, I will quickly introduce my colleague June to come on screen, and she's going to say a little bit about the Oxford English Hub. So June, I'll pull you on screen now, and go ahead and say hi to everyone.
Hello, Josh. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm June. I'm the customer success consultant here in Asia. I hope you enjoy our ELTOC so far with a lot of exciting and trendy ELT topics, right? For those who are still staying tuned during this break, I would like to take this chance to introduce you our brand new platform from Oxford University Press, which has been designed for the past 2 years in order to advance your technology use in the classroom and enable your professional development growth at the same time. But before I share more about it, I have 2 questions for you. So question number 1 is, have you ever heard of Oxford English Hub? You can comment in the chat box, please. Yes or no? Okay, let's see. All right. Let's see if we have any answer here. Yes or no? Have you ever heard of Oxford English Hub? No? Yes? Not yet? Okay. No? No? All right. Yeah, I'm so happy to see a lot of no answers because I have a chance to ask you the second question now. All right, so if you haven't heard of Oxford English Hub before, so in your guess, which of the following is true about Oxford English Hub? We have some options for you to choose from. First one is it gives teachers and students everything they need. Second is it works on any device. The third option is it puts together all of the digital course materials in one place. And the final option is all are correct. Okay, I let you guess. Let's see. All right, lots of people chose 4D. That's right. All are true, of course. Thanks for the great guess. Indeed, Oxford English Hub is our new launchpad for learning, giving teachers and students all access to all of their digital course materials in one place on any device. Sounds exciting? Well, and it doesn't just bring together the digital course materials, but also it can give you everything you need for your teaching journey so that you can plan, you can teach, you can assign, you can track and assess on Oxford English Hub. Isn't that great? Okay, so for teachers, you would have access to your classroom presentation tools, online practice, ebooks, tests, audio, video resources, and especially the free professional development courses. Okay, I think some of the teachers here would really love to have some courses about that, right? The professional development. So what about students? Your students can have access to all that interactive learning materials as well. And that includes the online practice, ebooks, audio, video resources, everything they need. Okay, so yes, and for this summer, good news is all of our hot off the press and best-selling courses are already available on Oxford English Hub for your use and your exploration. So for teachers who are teaching primary students, you can now easily find resources for Beehive, Bright Ideas, and Oxford Discover. Are you teaching any of those? And for teachers teaching secondary students, you can easily find our resources for Oxford Discover Futures, Live Vision, and Insight. Okay. Finally, for adults, we have Q Skills for Success, American English File, and Headway. All right. So if you haven't found your courses yet, don't worry, because we keep adding more and more. All right, so we will inform you and update with you shortly about the upcoming courses available on Oxford English Hub. But right now, don't miss the chance to click on the link below to get the 90-day trial code to access your course on Oxford English Hub. Okay, so Charles just helped put the link for you to click on. And here are the steps that you can follow to get the trial code and also to access Oxford English Hub. Now, please watch the video for the steps.
First, click on the link in the chat box and go to the free trial webpage. Then, choose the course you want to explore on Oxford English Hub. We'll choose Beehive. Now, fill out the form and look at your inbox for an email with the free trial code. Here is the email. Follow the instructions. Copy the code and redeem as instructed in the email. There you go. Now, If you have an Oxford ID, you can log into Oxford English Hub. If not, you can register for an Oxford ID like this. Now you can sign in. Click on your teacher role and you'll see your code is already here for you to redeem. Congratulations, you've successfully activated your 90-day free trial for Beehive.
Wow. So could you follow the steps? If not, don't worry. The link is still there for you and you can take your time exploring more after this. So don't miss the chance to explore and have fun teaching with Oxford English Hub and enjoy the rest of our ELTOC. If you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the comments and then I will answer later. Okay? Thank you very much and see you.
Thank you, June. Great to hear about that wonderful new digital platform, the Oxford English Hub. So thanks a lot, June. I'll go ahead and move you off screen now.
Thank you. See you.
All right. So we've got a couple minutes until our next session starts. So we're going to wrap up the day with the third session, which is making up for lost learning. I'll introduce the speakers in a moment, but before that, let me just remind everybody about the certificate. If you do want a certificate for this session, you have to make sure you click those links and fill out the form by Monday, 27th June, 9 a.m. British Summer Time. So it's only available for a short time. So if you need that certificate, make sure you do that. If you're watching this recording before that deadline, you can still apply for the certificate and get that if you need. Also on that page, that link that's in the chat, there's loads of resources from today's sessions, some of the focus papers and position papers. You can find links for those. You can also find links on how to follow us on social media, so you're always aware of when and what we've got planned, so you can join our events. And you can also sign up for a waiting list, which will keep you informed of all the latest events that we have in the pipeline coming up, so you make sure you don't miss any. So please do have a look at that page. And if you need the certificate, please remember it's only available for a short time. So do take advantage of that. We've got about another minute. So if you do need to fill up your coffee, water, whatever you're drinking, you've got a little bit of time until the next session starts. If you've got any questions for the moderators, as usual, whichever platform you're using, find the chat and pop them in there, and we'll try to assist you with what we can. And then, as you've been doing all day during the sessions, please do share your comments, share your suggestions, tell us your situations, because that really helps feed the conversation. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start introducing our next session. We've got 3 speakers that will be presenting in the next session. So before I bring them on screen, I'll give a quick introduction of each of them, and then I will invite them on screen. So for the next session, as I said, it is, excuse me, it's on making up for lost learning. So looking at coming out of the pandemic, what do we do with some of that lost time that our students faced? So we've got speakers from 3 different countries to give their perspective. So we've got Seema Khalid. She is a certified educationalist from the Australian Catholic University, and she's got expertise in educational leadership, management, staff development, and school management. She's been in the field of education for 16 years, and she currently works at Oxford University Press as a regional professional development coordinator. The second speaker, joining us from a different part of the world, Seema is based in Pakistan. I should have said that. Our next speaker, Pilar Núñez-Durian, she's based in Mexico, and she's has a master's certificate in information and communication technology in education and a BA in English language teaching. And additionally, she has over 22 years of experience in the ELT industry. She currently works at Oxford University Press as a customer success coordinator based out of Mexico. And then our third speaker for this session is Naoko Ashikawa. She's based in Japan, and she's got over 10 years experience teaching students as well as teachers as well, doing teacher training. She's worked with students of all ages, and she also works at Oxford University Press as in content marketing executive. So I'm going to go ahead and welcome all of the speakers on screen. And for this session, I'll remain on screen as well, and I'll help facilitate the discussion as we go through. So let me get our speakers on screen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Naoko, Pilar,
Good morning.
Hi, good evening here.
Thank you, Josh, for your great introduction.
Yes, welcome. Welcome to ELTOC. You're doing all right. Hello, Seema.
Hi, Seema. Maybe her internet connection was a bit unstable.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if her connection slows down, we'll just focus with Naoko and Pilar, and hopefully Seema can pitch in when the connection. Oh, there it goes. Seems to be moving all right now.
Great.
Okay, so today's session is on making up for lost learning. So we've got a few topics we're going to center the discussion around. So I'll just put the first one on screen now, is basically the title of the session. So how do we make up for that lost learning during the pandemic? So how about Pilar? Why don't you start off with your observations from your area of the world?
Of course, thank you very much, Josh. Well, during and after pandemic, I think the foremost of everyone's mind is learning loss. And this has presented itself in many ways. Initially, we were worried about missing students, at least that happened in Mexico. Many students were not actually logging into their systems, and there were a lot of dropouts. In Mexico, we saw alarming decline in enrollment. Here in Mexico, schools closure lasted around 6 months, causing an educational disruption equivalent to 2 years, according to the Instituto Mexicano de la Competitividad. Now, with the pandemic, one thing became crystal clear, and this is something that we have to think about. Our education system does more than just focusing on academics, and there is a lot more to consider along with overcoming this educational disruption, such as nurturing well-being for all, students, teachers, and even parents, seeking for mental health, healing trauma, keeping safe, and bridging digital divide. That's the challenge for education now. But for me, the solution is utilizing effectively technology and digital resources. Now, during and after pandemic, we saw constantly evolving schools models, whether fully remote, hybrid, in-person blended approaches, but we were not benefited by the perfect utopia they offered, at least not in Mexico. We are in fact suffering now from a digital burnout. I do agree that we have to continue developing digital skills and incorporating ITC in our lessons. But teachers, students, and even parents need formal training. And you know, Josh, this is something all of the speakers in this Congress have been talking about. Training. What I say is that with all the experience that we all now have about virtual environments and blended models, it is time to stop for a while and evaluate and utilize EdTech aligned to our specific educational needs or objectives. We have now to meticulously plan hybrid experience that will work for us and not against. If you ask me for best ways to implement technology to make up for this lost learning, I would suggest keeping in mind the following 3 premises. First of all, have a clear educational objective before you actually implement any kind of technology or digital resource or blended approach. Number 2, plan if you're a teacher, for example, take your time to explore and decide what will work to the specific objective or need that you have. Think of an effective classroom management structure, so as to avoid the students' distraction, lack of interest, or overuse of technology. Implement one resource at a time, 1 or 2 days a week. Try, then evaluate, check your results, and improve. If you're a principal, a coordinator, or an educational leader, design a 5-year plan. Think about where you are now, where you want to be, and define clear objectives. Find the appropriate technology or blended method to help you to achieve those goals. Think about which should be the consequences and which are the first steps to take. And finally, the third thing that we have to bear in mind is that we have to communicate and train, but not only to train the staff, to train students and parents as well. Mm-hmm. There is no reason, by the way, to implement technology if we will continue teaching over conventional methods. You and your educational community need a mindset change, where students will certainly be at the center of the learning process. That is what I can share from my side about the experiences we have during and after pandemic, Josh.
Great, yeah, lots of people agreeing in the chat. So yeah, I think you've really landed with at least people all over the world. How about Seema? Are you able to respond from your perspective on the same question?
Yes, I hope you can all hear me.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to speak from the context of Pakistan. In Pakistan, we saw school closures for around 2 years. Close to 2 years. For the first year, the schools were completely closed and we did not see any sort of face-to-face teaching. And then
seems your connection is slowing down, Seema.
Unfortunately.
Just give her a second. If it slows down, then... Oh.
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, you're back, yeah.
Okay. So in our context, what happened was the children were not prepared for such sort of learning, that because they did not have the gadgets, they did not have the technology support, which is why the government played a lot of role, and they had televised teleprograms. There were publishers who came in to provide that support to let learning happen.
It's breaking again.
Great, yeah. Seema, your connection's slowing down a bit. I'm going to jump over to Naoko, and we'll see if your connection starts to come back. So Naoko-san, could you give the context from your perspective in Japan?
Sure, yeah. Let me explain a bit about the situations in Japan. In Japan, all children from elementary schools to upper secondary schools were out of school for about 8 weeks in average during the nationwide school closure in 2020. And it was loss of 176 hours of face-to-face compulsory instruction time, and which was about 20% of their annual instruction time. So it may not sound a huge loss in comparison with other the situations in other countries. But of course, teachers and institutions were having very tough time to and working very hard to respond to the situation. And it was their first big obstacle to get over around that time. And after reopening their schools, they made their efforts to recover learning at school by setting special attendance days on Saturdays or at any alternative time slot, and also shortening the first summer break by a couple of weeks to have more face-to-face classes to catch up, while taking some basic anti-COVID measures simultaneously. And around the same time, the government pushed really hard for digitalization to support schools and teachers to make up for loss by delivering synchronous and asynchronous lessons. And by the end of 2021, yeah, I believe so, if my understanding is correct, almost all public elementary and secondary schools across Japan finally got a digital device to every single student for delivering online or distance learning. And also Japan's Ministry of Education, MEXT, MEXT, which stands for Ministry of Education, Culture, Sport, Science, and Technology Japan. It launched an online platform to provide online educational content and resources for teachers and also learners from preschoolers to teenagers. However, the problem is that many schools still don't use those devices or resources due to a lack of technical skills or digital literacy skills or any technical difficulties, or even just an information how to deliver those online lessons, because teachers aren't well prepared for teaching online, unfortunately. So first of all, most of public institutions in Japan have less opportunities to use digital devices for lessons with poor internet connection at school because of socioeconomic issues or other problems. Therefore, it was almost impossible that they had quickly switched all face-to-face classes to online. And they eventually recorded their lectures and just uploaded them onto some social media channels or any other channels online to let students access those videos at home for distance learning during and after the pandemic. And so that was mainly for public schools. And on the other hand, some private schools and universities and other private language schools had been having less technical difficulties and issues and more sufficient equipment and devices to have more online classes, to switch face-to-face classes to online. But the problem is that, behind that situation, the problem is that the students may have less chances for speaking practice due to online classes or any other reasons, for example, putting a face mask on. So they could be a negative effect in some cases for like communications or presentations or having some discussion activities, and even for pronunciation practice, because it requires a lot to keep doing those activities like in pair work or group work and discussions in large group online, or just give pronunciation practice without looking at how students' mouth is moving while they are putting a face mask on. So I would say that it should more time be given to speaking practice this year to compensate if teachers have less time for those activities due to the pandemic before.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Seema, do you want to try to pick up your stream of thought where we lost you?
Sure. So I just wanted to share that there has been a lot that happened in Pakistan, which made children lose a lot of learning because they were not equipped with the right technology. However, some of the things that gamification. So games were made possible for children because children now do not have that sort of capability to focus for hours. And they were bite-sized videos that came through. Teachers were making them, and as other speakers have already mentioned, that they were uploaded on social media, and the children would make up for their lost learning as per their convenience because there was a complete disruption kind of pace up for everyone. The other thing that we saw was a change in assessment systems. When we talk about large-scale assessment systems, we saw a lot of schools going with predictive gradings for that year. And that is something that made room for a lot of formative assessment, because we wanted to just see where a child needs support and
Seems like your connection's slowing down again.
Yeah, but the comment she was trying to finish was really interesting.
Yeah.
That thing on assessment was really difficult for everyone. We tried to use different kind of assessment methods that we weren't used to. I was reading some of the comments in the chat, and they were saying, some of them saying that we weren't ready for that, and we weren't trained for that. We weren't used to using continuous assessment, or just recently in the last talk, we listened about having these portfolios. We weren't used to that, and we were just thrown to these striving conditions with no kind of training. At least that happened in Mexico.
Yeah, yeah. How about that point that Naoko-san mentioned about the speaking practice? Do either of you have any opinions or comments on that?
Yes. So how about you, Pilar? In Japan, so putting a face mask is not mandatory, but it's a basic anti-COVID, one of the basic anti-COVID measures. So yeah, we are encouraged to keep putting face mask on yet.
Yeah, and that makes things a lot more difficult, right? Because when we communicate, it's really important to know if students are engaging. And one thing that we need to see is if they're smiling, for example, or just to know if there are, to help them with pronunciation. Well, we have to see how they are using their how they are moving their mouth, their lips, their tongue. So helping them with pronunciation was really difficult.
Yes, so it will be much easier to have a kind of speaking practice or pronunciation practice online, because they don't need to put a face mask on screen. So they are taking their classes at home, right? But if that case, we have different problems, because when we'd like to have a discussion session, but is it in a large group or class online, it's too difficult for teachers to manage. So yeah, we have different issues. So yeah, I guess that many teachers tend to have less those speaking practice online as well.
Right, right. Sima, I don't know if you're able to respond to that as well. I think you're still having a bit of connection issues.
There is a comment from Valen here, and I think it is a good idea. It says, we use transparent mask in order to show our face expressions and to show the lips and movements when pronunciation. That's brilliant, right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, that can be a good idea. I mean, using, well, what I saw here in Mexico is that in some schools, instead of using this mask, they were using just a cover, a plastic cover, and then that way it was easier to see the gestures from students and things like that. So that kind of strategies were the ones that we were using as well, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. All right, then. Well, thanks for all of the comments around sharing your experience in your individual countries. I think the next big topic is how do we move forward? We've all experienced varying degrees of loss of learning. So do we just draw a line and just move forward? Do we go back and pick up where we left off? I think it's a big question that needs to be addressed as well. So why don't we go around again and get everyone's opinion on that? We can try starting with Sima, see if your connection's working. If not, we'll jump over to one of the other speakers.
Okay.
I think still having a bit of issues. So why don't we start? Why don't we start with Pilar then, and move
Yeah,
from there.
of course. Yeah, of course. Thank you, Josh. What I think is right now we have to change our mindset. Stop having students as mere consumers. They can discover, they can share, they can create before you actually instruct them. That way, learning will become easier, enjoyable, and more meaningful. Utilizing digital resources effectively will help you with that. You don't have to be so techy or to have the top of the notch ed tech. Downloadable videos and audios along with the scripts will be enough with simple, well-designed activities for students. I just have read some comments about that. It is not the technology, but the teacher and the way the teacher is using technology that will help you to be successful. Let me share some ideas, Josh, because what we thought is like sharing with the audience ideas on how to do that. Then, why not, for example, just thinking about flipping the classroom, opening a discussion forum, and instructing students to download a video or an audio and the scripts. Downloading the video or the audio will help them to use it whenever they are, even without connectivity. Because remember that we have to think of ways to bridge the digital divide. That's a fact in many countries. Not all the students will have connectivity all of the time, but at least having 5 minutes to download the audio or video will help them a lot to continue doing activities whenever they can. Ask them, then they download the video, then you ask them to watch the video for general understanding, then to watch and read through the scripts. Finally, to find at least 3 different key language chunks related to a specific communicative competence. And then you have them posting in the discussion forum their findings and have them answering 1 or 2 general comprehension questions from the video in the forum as well. Once you have them in class, use all the information they have already shared to have them practicing in real human interaction with fellow students, simulating different real life contexts. Isn't that a clear flip model in action?
Interesting. Yeah.
Now, for the very little ones. There is no need to overstimulate kids with so much screen time. Why not using songs in a very meaningful and engaging way? Let me tell you about this. As home project or family project, and that sounds just beautiful, send a song and ask family members to prepare a video, adding movements to the song according to the lyrics. Then you collect all of those videos, and with the digital skills we have all developed, you produce 1 or 2 videos combining the pieces from all the video projects you receive from your students. And then you play that video in class, and you will enjoy yourself watching your students enjoying themselves on a screen. Then finally, you encourage some of them to lead some choreographies in situ. And that is just a wonderful example of natural approach in action, implementing basic EdTech. So again, according to the comments on the chat, it is not the technology, but the teacher who will make technology work for us.
Great. Yeah, I totally agree. It's the teacher is the most important resource in the classroom, so we have to make sure that they're on top of it. Seema's got her camera off, so we'll see if that improves the quality. Seema, do you want to try and feed into this question? Seems like we're not able to connect to Seema, so let's jump over to Naoko-san. How about you share your thoughts on this?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I really like the pillars ideas of activities. Great. And I think that we definitely need to keep moving forward since the situations are continuously changing, but need to fill the learning gaps while teaching new things simultaneously. So therefore, it will be working to add some new teaching tips. For example, as Pilar said, it will be working to prepare some bite-sized activities for reviewing words and add them in some parts of the class flexibly, or I'm setting a clear and achievable goal and objective for each lesson. So that would be one of the important keys for compensating and learning new things at the same time throughout the year. And also trying new pedagogical approaches might work for some teachers. So I would suggest them to visit our global website to take some free professional development online modules to get some new ideas and gain knowledge to refresh their teaching plans, and access some expert advice in position papers or focus papers on a wide range of topics around English language teaching, which also provide practical tips for modern teaching approaches. So that one of the ideas. And as Pilar mentioned about hybrid learning, one another thing that I'd like to mention is the benefits of hybrid learning. Many students now used to autonomous learning online. So it will be a good chance to use that for example, flipped classroom approach, as Pilar mentioned, or something similar. So looking at the circumstances globally, since students have been learning online throughout the pandemic, so both learners and also educators have more knowledge on how to use digital devices and platforms for learning. So even as students return to the physical classroom, this knowledge can be harnessed, bonded together to increase, for example, introduce different approaches to education, such as the flipped classroom approach or something, in which students can learn grammar or read articles, etc. at home online. And then they spend more time on communication and speaking practice activities in class. So for those ideas, I would suggest that using some resources. So on the Oxford Teachers Club website, teachers and parents can find any useful resources or supplemental materials or worksheets and activities that could be used for autonomous learning and preparing for those flipped classroom. So also, for example, using dictionaries will be another big help to develop learners' autonomy. So we also have a free online dictionary, which is available on the Oxford Learners Dictionaries website. So yeah, teachers can use that, and it will be another support for teachers and learners. So that's my suggestion.
Great. Yeah. And all those resources you mentioned, if you click on the link in the chat that we've been posting over and over again, you can access our website. You can access, the Teachers Club. So you can find all those resources there with that one link. But thanks, Naoko-san. Lots of great ideas. I want to try and give Seema another chance. She's updated her connection. So we'll see if she's got a chance to answer these, the question about moving on. Seema, are you able to
join? All right.
join?
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes.
Definitely.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Hybrid learning is the way forward. However, one thing that I need to talk about is the support that has to be given to parents as well. If we are to move in the hybrid direction, there is a lot of partnering with parents that is required, and we cannot do that. Learning will not be boosted. Your objectives will not be met because they are equal partners if we're moving in the hybrid direction.
It's breaking up a little bit again, isn't it?
Yes, it's a bit breaking, and I can hear well.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, Seema, it seems like the connection is still not good enough to get your comments on that. So why don't we move on? We've got about 10 minutes to go. We've got loads of questions and comments in the chat. Shall we take a look at some of those and seeing how we can support some of them?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. I was reading one that was really interesting about using WhatsApp. And do you know why? Because we still fear having our students using digital devices in the classroom. At least that happens in Latin America. If we think about having students working with their smartphones, well, teachers will ask about how we can use that. How can we suggest that? Like they are going to be distracted, they are going to be checking Facebook instead of participating. But using WhatsApp in the activities that Agencia Dublin, I took this from her suggestion. What using WhatsApp is a very useful tool. Using all kind of devices. I mean, you don't have to use like the most expensive EdTech, but basic technology will help you a lot and will make things a lot more engaging.
Great. Here's one that's just popped up recently about keeping students motivated and learning independently with internet issues as we're experiencing today. So what do you guys think about this topic?
Yeah, I found a very interesting comment about using offline resources. So that would be one of the solutions to these problems. And here in Japan, many parents and families have social and economic issues or other problems, and they even don't have internet connection at home or any digital devices. So printed materials, those materials are still working very well. Mm-hmm. So maybe that comment from Mario Zuniga, he suggested that using offline resources is also effective, and I agree with him about that. Some printed materials and a little bit of creation by teachers that would be very good learning materials for students at home. So that could be used in a flipped classroom for preparing for the lessons as well. So I think that would be one of the great solutions for the issues that you mentioned, Josh.
Great. Seema, you're back. Are you able to comment, or is our connection still? I think the connection's still not quite there. All right, Pilar, do you want to answer comment as well, or shall we jump to another question?
I can read some comments from Seema, because when we were preparing this session, we all share some ideas. So I'm going to read, because probably this is what she's trying to say. And I will exactly read her words. We cannot go back, and we cannot draw a line. Instead, we need to assess a students' needs and support them to help them transit through the learning loss. This can be done through several ways. Plan an intervention after each formative assessment, reflective teaching, customized target, use booster techniques such as spiraling, take help from class parents to volunteer with booster reading programs, change the pace of learning, and provide supports with changing the structure and format tests. I think those are brilliant ideas. That's why I wanted to read them.
Oh, great. Yeah. Thanks for chipping in when Seema's connection isn't up to par today. So it's great that we could get her thoughts out there as well. Let's go back to the comments and see what other questions we can pull out. How about this one from Rosendo Rodriguez about considering what schools will offer education online, flipped, etc.
This is very interesting question from Rosendo. because I think that now that we have tasted the flavor of all kind of methodologies, now schools are going to start offering different kind of models. And also because now we notice that it is easier for many professional students to continue developing themselves if they are 100% online, or if they tried the different kind of the blended learning methods.
Mm-mm. Yeah, it's quite important, isn't it?
Yes.
Naoko-san, anything to add?
Yeah, I would agree with Pilar. Yes, that's a great idea. That's really important. Yes.
All right, let me see. If you have any questions, anyone, any teachers joining, do pop them in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. I'm just scrolling back up, seeing if there's any more we can pull out. We had loads of comments toward the start. Just give me a second. Here's one about listening, about the drawbacks of teaching online. So she comments that we all had to face difficulties all over the world and adapt to the different materials and strategies. So I know that's probably how a lot of teachers felt. As teachers, how did you guys, how did you feel when this all happened?
Yeah. Pilar, do you have any good ideas to?
Well, I think that I was just recently talking with some Mexican teachers, and I told them that in Mexico we have a lot of brilliant ideas, that we can come with many brilliant ideas just from a piece of paper. So that is a thing that we have culturally. We adapt. We are able to adapt, and we make marvelous things with very simple objects. So that is what we were discussing, that now it is the time to use that creativity to do whatever we can in order to help our students. If we know that they have to have more listening practice or more speaking practice, then try to think about creative ways to have them doing that. Just reading some of the comments, there are some teachers saying that it is a good idea to have students recording themselves, having videos and then sharing those videos, and why not having them recording podcasts? I mean, this is a time when we have to use our creativity.
Yeah, I agree with you. We have so many different ways and channels to try and keep doing speaking practice adopted in some ways, like using and record videos, or using some apps, or using the chat box, or so speaking and writing practice would be.
Yeah, I can't pronounce this teacher's name, so I apologize. But he comments on that, like having the technology be purposeful and meaningful and setting clear aims for students. We have the technology, but we need to make sure that students are using it effectively for learning. So I think that's a really good comment.
Yes.
And that is, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, and this is actually the essence of digital literacy, that technology has to be used for the right purpose and it has to be meaningful. So if it's not purposeful and meaningful, it's not part of your digital.
Yeah.
Oh, it's working again, maybe.
Yeah, but her idea was, I totally agree with her idea. Technology should be purposeful and meaningful.
Yes. So at the same time, I think that developing children's digital literacy skills is really important too, because they need to find true and right information online, and they also need to have more critical thinking skills to get more reliable information or things there. So I think. That's another
and another idea that I have taken from the chat is that we can take advantage of the knowledge students already have about technology. Sometimes they know more about different technologies than us. It is a good idea to have them with some practical ideas about that. But again, remember that you have to decide how to use it in order to improve a specific educational objectives, not just to use technology just to have them enjoying or for entertainment, but with a clear educational purpose.
That's right. That's right.
That's right. I agree with you.
Well, we're getting to the last couple minutes of the session. If we have any other questions in the chat, please do pop them in. We could probably take one or two more. But yeah, there's one here from, it's not necessarily a question, but just a comment that, the pandemic was a great lesson for us all, learning new techniques, new practices, how to manage classes in different circumstances. But yeah, I think that's a very on point comment as well.
Yeah, true. In Japan, because of the pandemic, the digitalization was accelerated, and yeah, it was done so quickly. So we have good thing and bad thing about the pandemic, but we are keep learning.
Okay. Is there any final words from our speakers before we wrap up the session? Anything you want to close with?
Sure. My last thought would be, I am overall convinced that implementing technology, digital resources, along with a mindset change to teach will make up for lost learning, as long as they are aligned to educational goals and a meticulous gradual plan, including continuous training, bearing in mind as well for bridging the digital divide, well-being, improving mental health and safety for all the educational community, not only teachers and students, even parents. And well, if you want to know more about that or practical ideas, don't forget to download our position papers for more expert advice, or visit also and enjoy our professional models.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Anything, Naoko, Sima, or shall we just leave it there?
Yes, as Pilar mentioned. Sorry, Sima, please go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead because my voice then dies. So I just wanted to say that professional development is the only tool that is going to help us all. This session must have given you a number of ideas, and you have to pick and choose the ones that are relevant to your context. Not every
Yeah.
That is the way forward. So an amalgamation of all the things that you've learned from best practices, it is what needs to go into your classrooms, and you need to keep on learning and keep on trying new things and enhancing your own skill set in teaching and learning. So the digital learning is something that is very new for us. So that's a whole new avenue to explore.
Great. Thank you. And Naoko-san, I'll give you a chance to say some closing.
Thank you. Yes, as Sima mentioned, yes, trying some new pedagogical approaches or new things. For example, a flipped classroom approach or something. Sometimes it will be working for some teachers. So I would recommend to access our global website to get some resources to learn more about that approach or some other areas. So
and also don't forget to follow us on social media. Lots of ideas are being shared all the time through those channels, so it's a good resource as well. Okay, well, thank you so much. Yeah, we're at the end of the session. So thanks, Pilar, Sima, Naoko. I know we had a bit of connection issues, but I think you got through most of your points, Sima. So thank you very much to all three of you for joining. And I hope all the teachers really got a lot out of this session and the previous sessions. So thanks again. And I'm going to, I'll give you a chance to say goodbye before I pull you off screen. So
thank you very much, Josh, for leading this session. And I really enjoyed talking with you three.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Naoko. Thank you, Seema. This was a learning journey for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Seema.
Bye.
Yeah, bye. Thank you very much.
All right, so that brings us to the end of this block and the end of ELTOC. So thanks to all the teachers who joined the previous session 12 hours ago, and everyone who joined these sessions as well today. A reminder, if you want to get a certificate, you have a couple days. The deadline is Monday, June 27th at 9 a.m. British summertime. So do click on that link and get your certificate. There's also going to be a feedback survey there as well. So tell us what you thought of the sessions. For this last session, if you liked it, do hit those like buttons. If you know of a teacher that would really get a lot out of this session, make sure that you share it with them or tag them onto it. That can help a lot as well. And then I just want to say again, thanks to everyone for joining. Make sure you follow us on social media so you can know when we're going to be doing these types of events. And do tell us which sessions you got the most out of, because we want to keep delivering the content that is really relevant to your lives and will support you. So thanks again for everyone for joining today. And I hope to see you at a future event. The last thing I want to say is do share this event with any teachers, as I said, that you think needs this in their lives. Help us grow the community, spread good teaching practice, and hopefully we can make everyone's teaching easier and get more out of the students' learning as well. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.